The election is upon us, and there are things we need to be doing before we head for the polls. So, do you know who's on the ballot and the initiatives being pushed before you go to place your vote? Too many people go to vote without knowing what is even on the ballot. This is where the candidates can really capitalize on all of their campaign ads. All too often, people simply go to vote for the man of the hour and either fake the rest of it or do not vote for the other positions. This is due to an uninformed electorate. The end result of the polls is a fall-off in votes. Many place their vote for the head of the ticket, but may not make their way to the low man on the totem pole. There are several ways that can help with this problem. First off, don't wait to do your research until the last minute. Instead of relying on campaign ads and promotional material, research candidates to see how they vote or where they stand on the issues. One resource the New American offers is the Freedom Index. This is a great tool for rating congressmen on their adherence to the Constitution. If your congressman is up for re-election, see how well they are doing. To better prepare you for what's on the ballot, go ahead and download it on the internet and go over how you want to vote before you get to the polls. And you should get to the polls and vote in person. This election particularly will be a mess with so many mailed-in ballots. Just a number of them alone will create problems. So an in-person vote will be to your advantage. Of course, there's always been the issue of voter fraud. Once we established the secret ballot, voter fraud began. The only people who know the correct number of votes per candidate are those who count the votes. As Joseph Stalin, the communist dictator of Russia, said, quote, "Those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the vote decide everything," unquote. I ran for office a few times, and the first time I ran, I won the election and went to sleep happy. But by the middle of the next day, I had lost the election due to absentee ballot counting. Who knows? However, I do know that the powers that be were very much against me. The way things are going this election, it already looks as if voter fraud will be rampant. There are reports of misprinted ballots without Trump's name on them, caches of ballots discarded in ditches, dumpsters, and rivers, etc. Just down the road from our studio here, about a mile or so, several hundred ballots were discovered in a ditch alongside of the road. Now, I live in a 55-plus apartment complex, and they have a service where people will gladly pick up your ballot and deliver it to the drop-off for you. Well, no thank you. I want to make sure my vote arrives to be counted. As with other elections, there's always a divide. Why take the chance of your vote not counting? Many have also witnessed a great deal of animosity, for instance, campaign signs being destroyed, etc. That was a problem in all of my campaigns, with keeping my signs up and not destroyed by my opponent's organization. Now, all's fair in love and war, they say, but it shouldn't be in elections. So it is best we take the time to go directly to the polls and vote in person. In some areas, you can find out if your mailed ballot has made it to the proper place and counted. If that service exists in your area, contact them and ask about your ballot. The last election when I went to the polls, the computer counting the ballots wasn't functioning. I never did find out if the votes of the early voters were ever counted. Also, try to become a worker at the polls in the future. When you can become part of the process, you quickly find where votes can be skewed and know what to watch for. Experience over the years will mean a lot in this regard. For example, the old-fashioned voting machines with the individual levers and the curtain that closes and opens behind you were a problem. When they arrived at the polling places, they were wired shut, and there was no way the polling judges could determine whether the counters were set to zero. A friend of mine was a poll judge, and he refused to certify the machine at his polling place until he could see the count. After much hemming and hawing, with the poll being late to open, the man in charge finally opened up the back of the machine, and lo and behold, the counter had been preset to give the election to the local political party which controlled the process. Another acquaintance of mine ran for Congress, and he came in third. He was suspicious of the outcome and had a judge issue an injunction to hand count the ballots that had been inserted into the computers. And lo and behold, he came in first when the ballots were counted by hand. Stuff happens in elections, and we have to be watchful and mindful of what can happen and work to make sure we have honest elections. Many don't realize that at one time our elections were open and public, and everyone could see the results for themselves. Then the idea emerged to have secret ballots. Once this happened, we started to have voter fraud. The progression of how the fraud could take place became more and more sophisticated over time, with the addition of machinery and then computers in the process. The only way to stop this is for good people to get involved in the process of working the polling places and in the central counting house. If you can do this in the future, please get involved. There have been good articles printed in the New American Magazine by Mr. Kurt Hyde relating how fraud takes place and what to look for. You can look for these articles in the New American Archives online. With computers today, only the programmer knows who really wins.